Good afternoon and welcome to Pyramid Parent Talk. I'm Karen Harper Royal.
And I'm Lynn Farlow.
We're parents with Pyramid Community Parent Resource Center, providing information and support to parents of children with special needs in New Orleans. Pyramid Community Parent Resource Center provides one-to-one assistance, workshops on special education law, positive behavior support, and advocacy skills. You can reach us on the web at www.pyramidparentcenter.org or follow us on Twitter at PyramidCPRC, and on Facebook. Our Facebook page is Pyramid Community Parent Resource Center. And you can call our helpline anytime if you're having some problems or you need some advice, 504-899-1505, and we'll definitely get back with you. Today we're excited to have with us educator and award-winning author Lisa Delpit as we discuss her most recent book, Multiplication is for White People. And just a little bit about Lisa's book. Lisa's first book, Other People's Children, she focused on the cultural slippage in the classroom between white teachers and students of color. Now, in Multiplication is for White People, Lisa reflects on 2 decades of reform, including No Child Left Behind, standardized testing, and the creation of alternative teacher certification paths. As we well know, here in New Orleans, she also talks about the charter school movement, all which has left a generation of poor children and children of color feeling that higher educational achievement is not for them. Lisa is a MacArthur Award-winning. She's a MacArthur Award-winning author, and she teaches at Southern University Lab School and at Southern University in Baton Rouge, where she lives. Welcome, Lisa, to Pyramid Parent Talk.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Pyramid Parent Talk.
Great. The sound went out for a moment, so I wasn't sure if you could hear me. It's great to be here, Karen and Lynn. I didn't hear if you asked a question, but thank you so much for having me.
No, we didn't ask a question. We just talked a little bit about your book, actually both of your books, Other People's Children, a little bit about that one, and Multiplication is for White People. And we know that you're teaching in Baton Rouge. You want to tell us a little bit more about your work in Baton Rouge?
Well, I'm a professor, the Felton G. Clark Professor of Education at Southern University, and I work here with people who want to become principals, and also working with the College of Ed to rethink and give rebirth to the notion of focusing Southern education work particularly on children of color in urban settings.
Well, that's quite exciting work, especially in these times. In fact, this weekend I was at a meeting in Atlanta around preserving public education in the South and keeping public education public. And I know that you have quite a few opinions on that subject.
Right.
As we all at Pyramid, we've all have a copy of your book, and we're reading the book. And I know in the first few pages of reading the book, it's clear where the title comes from. But what we want to know is what made you choose that particular title, Multiplication is for White People.
Well, actually, I will tell you that the publishers actually chose the title, but where it came from is a African-American 7th grader was talking to her tutor who was trying to help her with mathematics, and she said to her tutor, "Miss D, how come you keep trying to teach me multiplication? Black people don't multiply. Black people add and subtract. White people multiply." Now, there is, to some folks, some humor in that, but it is very a distressing situation when our children have embedded in their psyches a concept that people who look like them can only perform at a lower level than white people.
Where do you think they got that concept from?
You know, it is Beverly Tatum, who's an author who wrote Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria? Yes. One of the things that she talks about is if you live in Los Angeles, you're a smog breather. And you don't mean to breathe smog. That's not your intent. You don't go about your life trying to breathe smog, but just by living there, you're breathing smog. And if you live in the United States, you're a racism breather. And it doesn't matter what color you are. There is so much in the national psyche that suggests that African Americans are less than, particularly intellectually, that they are criminals and that they are can't take care of things well, and all of that. And you don't intend to go about thinking that, but because it's so much a part of the media, of the larger, of tiny statements that people may make, our children as well as the adults in our society have internalized it. I gave a speech about 2 weeks ago, and a gentleman, a middle-class African-American gentleman, took his 5-year-old to Washington, D.C., and they were about to go into a museum. The child stopped and said, "Daddy, we can't go in there. That's for white people." And he was shocked because he certainly had not had that discussion with this child, and just the opposite. And yet somehow our kids are getting these messages, and the message of the book is that we need to be aware of the racism that exists in elements from educational policy to classroom curriculum, and we need to make sure that we do battle against that. And if we don't, then all of the new Common Core curricula or any other new reform, none of that will work unless we address this issue in our schools and outside of our schools.
So do you think this issue is being adequately addressed in some of the newfangled schools in New Orleans that put college pennants on the walls and all over the doors, and from kindergarten on they're telling kids, that you're going to college, you're going to college? Is that sufficient to address it?
Who's telling them this?
There's a multitude of schools in New Orleans.
But who are the teachers?
Well, a lot of those teachers are Teach for America young people, and it's almost it's too simplistic.
Right. And my question is, do the people who are telling them this look like them?
In most cases, they do not.
Right, and not that all teachers have to look like them. But if you are being told by somebody who shares none of your experiences that you can do something, why should you believe that?
Exactly. And I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at the release of the ACT scores in Louisiana recently, but I was flabbergasted to find that our ACT composite is still so low in Louisiana after all these years of this kind of reform and that kind of reform. And last year, they don't have the school-by-school results out, but I went and looked at last year's school-by-school results, and I looked at some of these schools with the pennants all over the place, and I was shocked that in many of these schools, the students as a composite, their composite scores would not even qualify them for top scholarships. So I feel like they're lying to the children, and they're not giving the children all of what they need to truly meet those expectations. And it's really bad when you lie to children. And lie to yourself.
As one of my friends says, if you don't go to jail, you're going to hell.
Absolutely.
Hi, Lisa.
Right.
This is Lynn. Let me ask you another question. So in your book, you talk a lot about your daughter. Tell us how she helped to shape your involvement in the education issues you talk about in the book.
I'm chuckling because she has continued to tell me that she has taught me everything I know about other people's children. And she is absolutely correct. This is a wonderful, creative, exciting young person who's now 24, who has dealt with every issue that I can imagine that any child in the school system has dealt with, and thus her mother has dealt with all of these issues. So I do understand, to some degree, a lot of the struggles that, even though she came from a middle-class family, there were other struggles that she had related to her learning style, related to ADHD issues, socialization issues.
Wait, are you sure that's not my daughter? That sounds like she could be my daughter.
Well, I think there's a whole crew of them who showed up to teach their mamas.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's also wonderful when our kids can do that. And dealing
with the system and trying to get them to address her needs, I certainly have realized how poorly we are set up to address not only children with educational issues, but children with any kind who differ in any way from a very strict notion of sit in your desk and do your paperwork. And they're not a lot, particularly in urban settings. There are cultural issues, for one thing, that most of our African American children need to have addressed. Just to give you a few things, they relate, as I'm sure your daughter did, and I know my daughter did. One of the things I talk about is that many African American children don't learn from a teacher, but for a teacher. So they will you see little kids saying, "Oh, Miss Harris, I did your homework," and what they mean is, I did your homework because I have a relationship with you.
Absolutely.
And that is not something that the young people who are coming to teach our children understand. They have been taught strategies for teaching or instruction and curriculum, but they haven't been taught the vital aspect of our children needing to build relationship. And if they don't have a relationship, they're not going to do the work.
I just want to remind people they can call into the show at area code 504-260-9265. We are talking with award-winning educator and author Lisa Delpit, author of the book Multiplication is for White People. Lisa, can you give us your view of the post-Katrina educational environment in New Orleans as it relates to privatization, or what some people call the corporate takeover of public education and charter schools?
Well, I think you said it all in that question. It is disenfranchising the communities. No one elected the corporations that are taking over schools or that are managing charter schools. Folks say that the schools are not for profit, but they're required to have charter managing agencies which do make quite a bit of money based on our children. Because it's set up in what's referred to as the market economy, it means that there's competition. When you have competition between schools as opposed to cooperation between schools, then even if you do find something that's working, you keep it to yourself because you want to keep your corner of the market. So therefore, you are not producing education for the largest number of kids, or good education. You also are pushed to get rid of children then who aren't going to make high scores, and that's done in all kinds of ways I've discovered. One way is because people have begun to track the number of kids who may get put out of school. Another thing that's happening instead of that is the rules put into place, some of them pretty trivial, but if the child breaks them, a parent is told, well, you can take your child out and we'll just and move them to another school.
Yeah, they tell us you have choice. You can choose another school. That's what we're told here in New Orleans.
Exactly. But on the other hand, they said if you leave your child, if you don't take your choice, then we're going to expel your child or suspend your child, and it's going to go on his or her record.
Exactly, and parents don't want to see that.
Exactly.
So they quietly go somewhere else.
Right. Exactly. And so that they're being many kids who have the greatest needs and need the most help are being pushed out of schools because by being set up in a market economy, the school leaders don't want to bring down the bottom line, which in this case, instead of dollars, is test scores. So I don't see a lot of good coming from this. When charter schools were initially, the idea of charter schools were initially started, it was started by teachers unions in, I believe, New York, and the idea was that teachers and parents could together create schools that would give parents and teachers choice. Obviously, that's been changed and taken over by entities that are seeing our kids as moneymakers.
And we know that this is happening in New Orleans, and I know that there are charter schools in Baton Rouge. Is it as bad in Baton Rouge as it is in New Orleans, in your opinion?
Well, no place is as bad as New Orleans.
And it's sad. We're laughing, but it is truly sad.
Right. It is very sad. And it's because of, the as some people refer to it, disaster capitalism that allowed people the opportunity to come in and create this non-system in New Orleans that privatizes everything that, I think your house might be privatized while you're not home if you aren't careful.
Absolutely. We have our first caller, Kaweku. Welcome to Pyramid Parent Talk.
Yes, good afternoon, guest, and good afternoon, hostess.
Good afternoon.
Pleasure. I wanted to say I got to meet Miss Delpit when she spoke at LSU quite a while ago. And when I was there at Southern, I reviewed her book for the publication at Southern called Books and Bites, Other People's Children. And I just wanted to say briefly it was good to see a multi-referential perspective in educating children. And one of her colleagues, no doubt, Herb Boyd, had done a book at the time, too, called I Won't Learn From You, who critically addressed why children take some of the options to learn. And I just wanted to say I'm delighted to hear you on the radio, and it's been a pleasure to read and to review your book. And I just wanted to, compliment you on that book. I was deeply impressed by it.
Well, thank you so much. That is so fun. That is so. I'm touched, and thank you for your words.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the call. Lisa.
Yes.
The next question that I have for you is, at Pyramid, we're parents of children with disabilities. So
Right.
We're interested in what your views are on educating African-American children with learning differences.
Well, I have one, and I think the problem, now I don't know if you ladies will disagree with me on that, but a problem I see in education in general is this tendency to create labels and to say, well, this kid is X or this kid is Y. And what I believe is that instead of using so many nouns to create labels, what we need to do is think more in terms of verbs. And what I mean by that is not what this kid is, but what does this kid do and what should we do as a result. Even children with the same label, so to speak, are very different individuals. And we need, I believe, to create an educational system that looks at who this child is in front of us, what their strengths are, what their challenges are, and create education for that child. And many of the things that we're creating will obviously fit other children as well. But to create this thing and this static label, I think, does no one a service, because then people will say, teachers will say, well, I don't know what to do with a child with whatever, Asperger's. However, on the other hand, if you say, this is John, John has difficulty socializing with his friends, and has a hard time writing. As a teacher, then, I know I need to help John socialize with friends and have some experience or some assistance with writing. But just by labeling him, it takes me away from figuring out what it is I should do.
Unless you've been in one of our workshops.
To verbs. Go ahead.
I said, unless you've been in one of our pyramid positive behavior support workshops, because one of the things that we do in that workshop is we take parents through an exercise that looks at behavior. And so we help to prepare parents for participating in those IEP meetings where the I means individualized. And
right.
So this is, I think, what you're talking about is a perfect example of the intersection of where we need to actually put the law into action, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. Because we're dealing with, I guess, a big governmental entity. They do have the labels, you have to fit into a category. That's where the labels come from. But beyond the labels, as parents and teachers, we have to come together, and that's supposed to happen inside that IEP meeting, the Individuals with the Individualized Education Program meeting, and we look at just those things. What is John doing, and what can we do to address what John is doing or what John is not doing? And all too often, those meetings don't happen, or parents or the teachers don't have enough of the information that they need so that they could work well together. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. Both of my sons have ADHD, and thankfully over the years I have been able to learn how to work with the school to address those issues, and we just have to work even harder to make sure more parents know how to make sure that their child is not looked at as a label, or their services aren't looked at as a place somewhere you go over here because you have that particular label. We definitely need to individualize.
And I think, too, that is this Karen or
yes, this is Karen. This is Karen.
Okay, Karen.
And I'm listening.
I think as well that the problem lies in how we are educating teachers, because we have got, and with the state mandates right now, well, national mandates right now that focus only on instruction and curriculum. We need more rigorous instruction and a rigorous curriculum. Those things are great. But what I believe is that we have to help teachers understand that they are not teaching a curriculum, they are teaching children.
Absolutely.
And the teaching of children means that whether a child has a label that someone has attached or not, there are going to be differences. So we have to start there as opposed to starting with, I believe, the curriculum.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Lynn and I are looking up at the time. We cannot believe that we only have 5 minutes left. But what I want to say is that the book is excellent. I am not finished reading it, but it's right from the very beginning. It is chock full of very good information. And I was noticing that even in the introduction, you have some really good strategies, common sense strategies about what we can do to help teach children, and it's not rocket science. Do you want to just take a little bit of time to talk about that as we wrap up the show?
Well, I don't have the book in front
That's
of me.
okay.
I think you're talking about the 10 factors I
Yes,
believe
the 10 factors.
need to be in place, and I would need you to probably read them to me.
I can read them off, no problem. Recognize, and we'll just talk about a couple of them. Recognize the importance of a teacher and good teaching, especially for the school-dependent children of low-income communities. Recognize the brilliance of poor urban children and teach them more content, not less. I love that one. You want to talk a little bit about those first two?
Well, I'll start with the second one, and that is that we have one of the tendencies is to teach remedial classes, and there are a couple of problems with that. First of all, kids who are already questioning their ability in this society, when you put them in a remedial class, they are in a position to question it even more. They believe this is okay. So this is the fact about me. I'm less than. I don't understand. I'm not as intelligent. If we change that and we can teach the same amount of material and the same kind of material in a different context. One, I'll try to say quickly that a group did here was to have students do an oral history of their high school. And they interviewed people, they created videos, they created timelines, they researched documents, everything that you would want them to do in any so-called remedial program, but it was put in the context of you are doing this is research, this is what people in college do, and you are doing this because you are brilliant. And so in that context, you're teaching not only whatever you might teach in remediation, but you're also teaching kids some very high-level, college-level skills. And that's what I think we need to do at all levels, just make sure that we are teaching them to do more rather than less.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we want to thank you for joining us, and this half hour goes by really fast. Thank you very much. We're really enjoying your book.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation a great deal.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye-bye, Karen and Lynn.
All righty,
bye-bye, Lisa. Thank you. We'd like the listeners to know that our next meeting for Pyramid would be next week, October 1st, at CC's Coffee Shop at 10 a.m. At 2800 Esplanade Avenue. So if you plan to join us, please call us at the Pyramid Helpline at 504-899-1505 with your questions or your concerns, and let us know you're coming to that meeting.
And our next show is going to be October 8th. And our topic is School Justice Week, which is October 25th through the 21st through the 25th, with events on October 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. Pyramid Parent Talk is a program of Pyramid Community Parent Resource Center. Our show is aired every second and fourth Tuesday at 2 p.m. You can reach us on the web at pyramidparentcenter.org. Hit us up on Twitter and Facebook. And remember, you are not alone.